Up next on One American News, the UN finds crimes against humanity have been committed in North Korea. We'll tell you what the organization recommends for the man in charge of the closed-off country. Plus, supporters of President Bashar al-Assad are pleased with the lack of progress in the Geneva peace talks. This as Senator John McCain criticizes U.S. policy in Syria. And a hijacked plane lands safely in Geneva, but the real story is in who the hijacker is and why he did it. Those stories and much more headed your way as One American News starts right now. Thanks for joining us this President's Day, February 17th. I'm Lauren Nieto. An alarming situation over the skies of Europe as the co-pilot of an Ethiopian Airlines flight hijacks his own plane. According to officials, the co-pilot, a 31-year-old Ethiopian man, redirected the plane when the pilot left the cockpit to use the bathroom. The flight was headed to Rome but was forced to land in Geneva, Switzerland.
What he wanted the asylum in Switzerland. That's the motivation of the hijack.
The plane was escorted by Italian fighter jets after the co-pilot notified an Egyptian control tower of his plan. Reuters reports that once the plane landed, the hijacker climbed down a rope out of the cockpit window and was promptly arrested. Swiss prosecutors have now taken over the case and say he will be charged with taking hostages, a crime that could warrant 20 years in prison. The flight crew and almost 200 passengers were unharmed. Secretary of State John Kerry speaks out about the civil war in Syria during a visit to Indonesia. He accuses the Syrian government of making no effort to end the nearly 3-year-long conflict and preventing any progressive discussion in the Geneva II peace talks.
We still believe there is no military solution with respect to Syria. There has to be a political resolution. But right now, Bashar al-Assad has not engaged in the discussions along the promised and required standard.
Kerry called the Syrian government a magnet for terrorists, saying Assad has carried out state-sanctioned terror against his own people. And though Assad's government faces heavy scrutiny from around the world, many Syrian citizens still stand behind their leader. Deborah Ludebeck has more on the story.
A show of support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Young people gather in Damascus, singing, chanting, and waving flags. They are rallying after the second round of the so-called Geneva II peace talks offered little more than an agreement to meet again.
We gained victory. We did not fail. The opposition failed. They took us to Geneva in an attempt to make us fail, but we did not fail. We succeeded with our politics, dignity, and strength. We are strong.
After almost 3 years of conflict that has killed more than 140,000 people, a schoolgirl still has hope for the future.
We are here to say to President Bashar al-Assad that we are with him. We are with you. We do not wait for Geneva.
On Saturday, international mediator Lakhdar Brahimi apologized to the Syrian people for the lack of progress at the talks.
Meanwhile, Senator John McCain is calling the U.S. policy towards Syria a disgraceful failure. This as peace talks between the Syrian government and opposition movement generate little progress. The civil war has left nearly 5,000 people dead over the last 3 weeks, and McCain insists the Obama administration must consider other options.
Policy toward Syria has been an abysmal failure and a disgraceful one, as we have watched these horrendous what Director Clapper said was a apocalyptic situation.
About 11,000 documents and photos that recently surfaced allegedly show the Syrian government torturing and murdering civilians. U.S. National Intelligence Director James Clapper says those files are authentic. And turning to other news, United Nations matters, the UN warns North Korean leader Kim Jong-un he may be held accountable for ordering widespread crimes against civilians in his own country. Here's Matt Arabi with more.
As North Koreans celebrated the birthday of their late leader on Sunday, the United Nations was getting ready to release a scathing report on the reclusive country. It released on Monday a detailed account of North Korea's human rights violations. The report, nearly 400 pages long, lists atrocities including murder, torture, rape, enslavement, executions, and starvation, crimes against humanity that the UN said borders on genocide. Michael Kirby headed the commission behind the report. He compared the crimes to those committed by the Nazis.
At the end of the Second World War, so many people said, if only we had known the wrongs that were done in the countries of the hostile forces. If only we had known that. Well, now the international community does know. The international community will know.
Timed with the release of the UN report, human rights group Amnesty International released interviews with North Korean defectors who had been imprisoned. Their descriptions of life in the camps are similar to accounts depicted in this artwork from a 2011 exhibit in Seoul, South Korea.
The first bullet hits the head strap, and the brain and blood splatters. People scream in horror at the sight.
Pregnant women get sent to labor camps to carry loads up and down the hills, which cause miscarriages.
When my parents starved to death, I didn't have coffins for them. I wrapped their bodies with straw, carried them on my back, and went to bury them myself.
The UN report recommends the atrocities in the north be brought to the International Criminal Court. It said Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un himself should face justice for ordering these crimes. But on Monday, North Korea categorically denied such abuses take place, saying the UN's report was an effort at regime change under the guise of human rights concerns.
Turning now from human rights to civil rights, opponents of gay marriage deal with continued setbacks. In recent weeks, federal judges in 4 states have overturned bans on same-sex marriages. As more states overturn the law, opponents are looking at new ways to keep marriage recognized as between a man and a woman. Most are calling for a constitutional amendment, while others argue it should be a states' rights issue and left up to the people. Former presidential candidate Mitt Romney spoke with David Gregory on Meet the Press.
Well, I think marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. And I think the ideal setting for raising a child is in a setting where there's a father and a mother. Now, there are many other different settings that children are raised in, and people have the right to live their life as they want to. But I think marriage should be defined in the way that has been defined for several thousand years. And if gay couples want to live together, why, that's fine as well. That's their right. I do believe, by the way, that it's best decided by the people rather than by the courts. I think when the courts step in and make a decision of this nature, they're removing from the people something which they have the right to decide themselves.
Virginia is the most recent state to overturn the ban on same-sex marriage. Despite having the law overturned, the ruling has been stayed pending appeals. Heading to Russia now, a heavy layer of fog in Sochi forces organizers to postpone some Olympic events. The men's biathlon and men's snowboard cross will be put off until tomorrow, but the International Olympic Committee says the fog should not continue to cause any problems.
I think it's actually quite ironic that the biggest issue we've had so far is due to winter fog, and that's been led to the biggest postponement we've had so far is due to winter fog. And I believe the temperatures are dropping in the last day or so. Seems to be that no event has been cancelled so far, compared with previous games in Vancouver, previous games in Nagano, previous games in Sarajevo, previous games everywhere.
And still to come on One America News, the bizarre demise of a Kentucky preacher famous for handling snakes. And a teenager is charged with murder and allegedly claims to have killed dozens more across the country. That story after the break. A teenager being held in Pennsylvania is charged with killing a man she met on Craigslist. And now she's claiming that she's killed dozens more across the country and would do it again. Paul Chapman has more on this developing case.
Miranda Barber is accused of at least one killing in the United States and said to have admitted another 22. The 19-year-old is charged with murdering a man she met through a bogus sex ad on the Craigslist website. Barber reportedly says she was part of a satanic cult and felt no remorse for her alleged victims. A jail cell interview with her was reported in the Sunday Item newspaper in Sunbury, Pennsylvania.
She was very well-spoken, very mild-mannered, very polite. I mean, she was very polite and very just soft, very soft. And she never hesitated in anything she said.
Barber and her husband Elliot, seen here in file footage, deny killing Troy LaFera, who was stabbed and strangled in November.
A heartbreaking find in Millington, Tennessee leaves police one step closer in a missing baby investigation. A motorcyclist discovered a dead baby in a ditch on the side of the road on Sunday and immediately called authorities. Millington Police Chief Rita Standback says dealing with a case like this is always difficult.
It's one of the hardest things you deal with when coming to a scene when someone possibly have done something to a baby. So how do you prepare yourself? You can't prepare yourself for that. So it's heartbreaking. It's very heartbreaking.
A possible connection to a missing seven-week-old baby brings Memphis police into the ongoing investigation. In January, Andrea Walker said her baby went missing after she left the infant with her toddler son to drop her 5-year-old off at school. And prisons across the country face a growing smuggling problem, and we're not talking about drugs or weapons. Cell phones are being found in everything from cigarette packs, diapers, food packages, and even body cavities. Inmates are using them to continue illicit activities behind bars. They can use the phones to make threats, plan escapes, and make money. Prison officials say they found around 4,200 phones last year, which is about 11 a day. Kentucky reality TV preacher dies as a result of his unconventional religious practices. Sandy Kozel has the story.
A snake-handling pastor who's appeared on a TV reality show has died from a snake bite. Pastor Jamie Coots was handling a rattlesnake during his Saturday night service in Middlesboro, Kentucky, when witnesses say the snake bit the back of his hand. Middlesboro police say an ambulance went to the church, then to Coots' home, where the pastor refused treatment. Emergency workers left, then came back an hour later and found Coots dead from a venomous snake bite.
And I liked him a lot, and I don't agree with his interpretation, but you just have to have a tremendous amount of respect for his determination to follow his beliefs. I mean, that's what he believed, and he would not step away from it.
Coots had previously said he was following the Bible when he used the snakes in his religious services. His son Cody says snakes bit the pastor 8 other times, but his reactions were never that severe. Coots had appeared on the National Geographic television reality show Snake Salvation. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Some residents in West Virginia are still afraid to use their tap water. Alex Sands has more on the ongoing health scare after a major chemical spill.
In Charleston, West Virginia, there's a growing distrust and anger.
A lot of friends, a lot of family. Everyone's afraid of the water right now. Makes you want to move.
For Casey Landers-Jones and her daughters, the effects of the water crisis are personal.
Her eyes swelled up. Very itchy eyes, rash on her arms and hands. It's extremely bothersome. I have not given my baby, I have a 3-year-old that has not taken a bath since.
Stories like hers are increasingly common. 5 weeks after a chemical spill in the Elk River compromised the water supply of 300,000 people. This smell is still in the water. Thousands refuse to use it, instead relying on distribution centers for clean drinking water.
This has been a real tragedy. And when you get water out of your tap that is still cloudy, then you know that there's still something wrong.
Despite assurances from state and federal officials, the city's top health officials still has serious concerns.
The bottom line here is this. People need clear guidance, and that has been lacking for the past 5 weeks.
The CDC cautioned women who are pregnant not to drink the water. He had recently offered more assurances, yet at a congressional hearing in Charleston, no one could say the water is safe.
It has burned me so tremendously. The chemicals have interrupted my life and my well-being again.
Sue Davis grew up in West Virginia's Chemical Valley.
Some people are very frightened. I won't get over this one. Most of the people that I've talked with still refuse to use the water. They do not think it is safe.
A fear that for so many is a part of daily life. Alex Sands, The Associated Press, Charleston, West Virginia.
Moving to Washington now, House Speaker John Boehner takes some heat from the Tea Party for allowing a vote on a debt ceiling extension last week. While Tea Partiers had called for federal spending cuts to balance a debt ceiling increase, the House Speaker instead backed a clean bill, giving Democrats a legislative win. But despite Tea Party criticism of Boehner, there are also whispers among the GOP that he showed leadership in allowing the bill to go to a vote. The bill increased the Treasury's borrowing authority and prevented a debt default. Appearing on CBS's Face the Nation, celebrated journalist Bob Woodward summed up the Republican reaction.
The Republicans who said, I don't want to vote to raise the debt ceiling, people like Paul Ryan are privately saying and making it very clear Boehner did the right thing.
After passing the measure by the House, it went to the Senate, where it was also approved, despite a filibuster attempt by Tea Party Senator Ted Cruz. Instead of stalling the bill, the move forced Republicans to vote for the debt ceiling increase in order to avoid a default. As Woodward explains, GOP leadership is losing patience with the Texas lawmaker.
Made people really unhappy, including Mitch McConnell, who thinks that Cruz is literally the most selfish senator he's ever seen in his years there.
And coming up next on One America News, Italy's newest and youngest prime minister-to-be has big plans for the country. We'll tell you about some of the obstacles he's facing up next. Italy's president is asking the young mayor of Florence to form a new government to carry the country through the end of the legislative term in 2018. Here's Joanna Partridge with a look at what the country's next prime minister has planned.
On his way to becoming Italy's youngest ever prime minister, the 39-year-old mayor of Florence, Matteo Renzi, has been given a mandate by the president and will now attempt to form a new government.
The sense of urgency is extraordinarily delicate and important, but it's also true that, given the timescale we've set of a full parliamentary term, we'll need a few days before formally accepting the mandate.
Renzi helped oust his Democratic Party rival Enrico Letta, frustrated at the slow pace of reform. If he can build a coalition, he'll be the third prime minister in a row to come to power without being elected. The Eurozone's third largest economy is technically out of recession. It returned to growth in the final quarter of 2013. But it's been suffering its most severe slump since the Second World War and has €2 trillion of public debt. The markets seem to like Renzi's reform pledges, but he'll have to deal with the same unwieldy coalition which failed to pass reforms under Letta, says Sarah Hewen from Standard Chartered.
If Matteo Renzi can actually press ahead with these reforms, then market would take this very well. The big question is how much can he actually achieve, given that other governments have struggled to make headway in the Italian parliamentary process.
Renzi needs to seal a formal coalition deal with the small centre-right NCD party to secure a majority. He'll then name his cabinet before seeking a formal vote of confidence in Parliament, expected later in the week. Some analysts suggest Renzi should have bided his time for a little longer before ousting Letta. Alessandra Galoni is Reuters Southern Europe editor.
The manner in which this was done came rather as a surprise. Everybody had expected Renzi to want to get to the premiership, and in fact he had been agitating for change in Italian politics for quite a while. But few expected that he would do it so dramatically.
Renzi's making big promises. Swift action to create jobs, reduce taxes and cut back bureaucracy. But he hasn't made specific policy proposals. And even a man who wants to move quickly may struggle with a slow system.
Cuba will no longer be processing visas for U.S. travel. The announcement says that travel will end until the Cuban government can find a new U.S. bank to process visa fees. It's unclear why no bank is servicing the accounts, though Cuban diplomats blame the U.S. government's embargo. The State Department says it's been working with Cuban officials to identify a new bank. As of now, Cuba will only permit humanitarian travel. Despite strong objections, Pentagon officials are issuing warnings after the Afghan government released 65 prisoners. They say if the militants return to combat, they could be hunted down by U.S. forces.
This wasn't a negotiated decision. This was a unilateral decision by President Karzai to release these individuals. We had evidence, we presented evidence that they were dangerous and shouldn't be released, and he made the decision to do it anyway.
The prisoners were released on Thursday from a former U.S. prison in Afghanistan. The U.S. believes the men are Taliban fighters and bomb makers who will likely return to killing foreign forces and Afghans. Officials say some of the prisoners are directly linked to attacks that killed or wounded 32 U.S. personnel and 23 Afghan citizens. And in Iraq, gunmen killed 5 policemen at a checkpoint near Kirkuk. And we warn you, this story contains some graphic images. Here's Deborah Ludebeck.
Blood spills in Iraq after gunmen kill at least 5 policemen in an attack on a police checkpoint south of the Iraqi city of Kirkuk. The pre-dawn attack took place in Taza, a predominantly Shiite town. Authorities say the gunmen first slit the throat of a policeman on duty on the night shift. Later, they entered another building where 4 other policemen were sleeping. They shot them dead on the spot. No one is immediately claiming responsibility for the attack. Kirkuk sits atop one of Iraq's key oil-producing fields. It's an ethnically mixed city at the heart of a dispute between the Arab-led central government in Baghdad and ethnic Kurds who have regional authority.
And in Libya, 3 years ago today, the revolution which removed dictator Muammar Gaddafi began. As Paul Chapman reports, Libyan citizens are still celebrating.
It's been 3 years to the day since the start of the revolution that brought down Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Many in Tripoli see February the 17th as a cause for celebration.
I've been waiting for this day to come, counting the minutes and seconds. I'm happy with this blessed Eid, where tyrants and humiliation have fallen, and God willing, the country will now find peace.
These were the scenes in Tripoli 3 years ago. It all began with what was called a day of rage following a riot 2 days earlier over the arrest of a human rights activist. Bloody civil war raged for months. Gaddafi was eventually killed by rebels along with his son Motasim. Another son, Saif al-Islam, was captured alive. In the present day, Libya is due to elect an assembly on February the 20th to draft a constitution intended to advance the country's transition to democracy.
In South Africa, 12 illegal miners are rescued from an abandoned gold mine. Others remain underground, and Deborah Ludebeck explains why they fear coming to the surface.
A dozen South African illegal miners are brought to the surface Sunday after being trapped in an abandoned gold mine near Johannesburg. They were never supposed to go into the mine.
This was a closed shaft. It was closed with the concrete slabs, deliberately so to prevent people from entering. But they have somehow managed to open up a hole on the side. And currently, I think we are able to talk to the people that are trapped inside there, and we are enlarging the hole so that we can be able to leave them out of the shaft.
Authorities say an unknown number remain underground and may fear arrest. Those brought to the surface were checked by medics and then handed over to the police.
There we go.
Illegal mining of abandoned shafts is common in South Africa. The miners often live underground in dangerous and precarious conditions. Fatal accidents are common, and underground battles between rival groups have also been reported. As the rescue operations end for the day, there are no immediate reports of death or injury.
Thank you so much for watching One America News. This is your nation, your news. I'm Laura Nieto. You can follow us at oann.com and even comment, give us your feedback on our Facebook page. Have a great day.